Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Bernotas, and I'm the Director of Instrumental School Methods and Repertoire for Alfred Music. And I'm very excited to be here with one of our amazing composers, Victor López. Victor has worked as an educator and an administrator in the public schools for 35 years. He's also an exclusive composer, arranger, and clinician for Alfred Music with over 450 publications to his credit. Victor, thank you for joining me today for 5 questions with Victor López. All
Thank
right,
you.
you are welcome. Let's get right into our questions. The very first question is: who is or was or has been your mentor or inspiration?
Well, if we're talking about writing, I had a very fine band director at University of Florida in Gainesville. He's now passed away, and his name is Richard W. Bowles, and he had one of the top 100 best marches in the world that he wrote, and he was a great mentor while I was at the university. And actually, I took a few classes with him, but there weren't a lot of students that had signed up for the class, and he would have me sign up for an orchestration class or some other class, but I would report to him. And
Oh,
I had almost like a private lesson in writing. And he's the one that inspired me a lot. And great arrangements that he wrote while I was a student there. And I would say Richard Bowles.
that's great. And it's great. Anytime I ask anybody that question, it always winds up being a teacher, and which is fantastic because we probably have teachers watching us, and it's always good to remind them that you are the inspiration for somebody else, and it's going to be you kind of pass that on. It's really exciting things about being a teacher and a writer and all the different hats that you've worn throughout your career. And leads me to my next question. Now, I know this, but I'm not sure everybody else knows this, but what is your primary instrument?
My primary instrument is trumpet. And I've always regretted not learning to play piano
Uh,
because it's such a complete instrument. I mean, so, but trumpet is the instrument. And I started on percussion. I was a drummer, and I was in middle school at that time. And, those drumsticks were like $1.90 at that time. But I loved the 1As, which were very thin,
uh,
However, they would break often. And so I was constantly buying them. So I told my dad that I wanted an instrument, and I kind of liked the trumpet, and an instrument that wouldn't break as often.
that's right.
So yeah, my cousin actually was in the same band, and he played trumpet. So we kind of switched. He ended up playing drums, and I playing trumpet. And he's now the CEO of Miami Jackson Hospital here in Florida, so in Dade County.
Wow. That's
Yeah, yeah.
fantastic. That's space. That's awesome. All right. How about our next question here, which is: how did you get your start into the publishing and composing world?
Oh well, it happened one time when I was the band director at Miami Senior High School, and I was the chairman of District 16, the Florida Bandmasters Association chair of the district, and I was holding a Saturday morning meeting with all band directors in our band room. I had invited Robert W. Smith, Jack Lamb, and Jack Bullock to come and actually speak to the band directors about copyright, uh, the copyright law, what we can copy or not copy, and such, all those things. And then there were other topics that came up as, the audience there was uh, asking questions. And so on the way out after the meeting, I approached Robert, and I mentioned to him that I was writing for the band and that I did band arrangements. And so he said, "Oh, that's great." And I said, "I've been trying to get into the publishing business, but it's been hard." And he says, "Well, why don't you mail me a couple of your best charts so we can look at them?" And so I said to myself, I said, "Oh, here we go again. Mail me the charts. It gets put at the bottom of the pile, and you never hear anything." Okay. But it didn't turn out that way. It was so interesting. I did not mail him anything because I kept thinking which charts I was going to mail him and all that. And so in the meantime, he calls me, and a student of mine, the phone rings, a student of mine picks up the phone and says, Mr. Lopez, there's a gentleman that wants to speak to you. And, being a band director, you're always thinking, oh, here we go, another candy salesperson, right? But no, it was Robert. And Robert says, Victor, remember me? We were there for your meeting. I said, yeah. And he said, well, I just got off the phone with Gloria Stefan because our company, at that time it was Columbia Pictures or CPP, I can't recall now. He said, we're about to publish Conga. And Gloria has asked that we use you as their arranger. See, I had a conversation with Gloria about this. And I said, Gloria, is now the Conga is moving into the top 10. And once it gets there, these publishing companies are going to write, whoever it is, he's going to write an arrangement. And it'll be nice if I could do it. I mean, I can write an arrangement. And she said, well, yeah, I'll talk to Emilio about it. So anyhow, so Robert got the call and he says, we're interested in doing that. You play in the band, that'll be cool. And so can you, the company at that time was in Hialeah, which is very close to, maybe half an hour from where the school was. And he said, can you bring me an arrangement and can you show me some of your charts so we can decide, So sure enough, I went by and met him again. I dropped the arrangements and then I went back to school. I'm doing all of this without signing out.
Oh, yeah. Can't do that anymore.
I know. So then I went back to school. An hour later, Robert calls. He said, hey, Victor, all stops out. Write it the way you like, as hard as you want. It doesn't matter. This thing's going to be great. So yes, that's how I got started. And I wrote Conga, which was my first arrangement for Columbia Pictures. And it sold over 2,000 copies that year.
Wow.
Which is unheard of now these days,
That's amazing, yeah.
So yeah, that's how I got started. So the first year was one arrangement, and then the year after that were 5 arrangements, and little by little, and it kept growing. So
that's fantastic. So it's all relationship based. You meet people and you try and you talk and you give it a shot. And imagine if you never followed through on that. If you never actually went through, say that he didn't talk to Gloria and you never actually went through your charts and sent it in the mail. It would be a whole different experience. It
never hurts to ask,
Right.
And I told her, I said, I can write this piece. And she said, okay. Emilio was the one that was kind of, well, we'll see if CBS approves that. He always had some kind of an excuse because he wanted to be the person to ultimately say yes or no.
Wow. That's great. That's a great story. I think it's inspirational for other people to just go for it and just keep on trying and build those relationships and not give up on it. That's fantastic.
Yes. Yeah.
And you've had some success in your career doing this, I would say, right? All right.
A little bit.
A little bit. As you emailed me a chart this morning, right? However many years later. All right. So speaking of that, sending me a chart this morning, what I think people will be interested in this, question number 4. What is your compositional process? How do you start a new piece? And a little follow-up of what advice do you have for any aspiring composers out there?
Well, the first part of the question, I know it's crazy, but sometimes I pick the title or I come up with a title and that title leads me musically to something. And I do that a lot with the jazz catalog, when I do an original. And sometimes the title, which is, it can be very difficult to find a title for a piece many times. It's what kind of leads me into things. Sometimes it's just a rhythmic figure that I hear, and then all of a sudden I start developing it in my head, and then I start coming up with ideas and playing with it. And it's not necessarily like all of a sudden I get this beautiful melody in my head and I write it. It doesn't happen that way. I would consider myself, Chris, someone who is when writing non-conventional. Okay. And I don't follow too much the theoretical way of composing.
Mhm.
And sometimes, like, for example, my writing is very vertical, if you will. Sometimes you look at the horizontal part of it and you may see a note or two notes that don't actually match the chord in that given moment, but because the line is vertical. And the way it moves, it calls for a non-harmony note, if you will.
It's a lot of experimentation.
Right, right. And so what really has helped in my early days, it was I used to have to my band. I always tell young writers if they have an opportunity, especially band directors, many of them, they want to get a crack at, writing music and stuff. I said, write for your band. Just write for your band. And this way, not only, I mean, you have a live performance right there. So you're hearing your kids playing it, but the kids enjoy that, and they play it with a lot of heart because it's their tune that the band director wrote, and so it's kind of cool to do that. And I now with a computer, since I am no longer a band director, then I rely on Finale playing back, which is not the same, but it's pretty good and gives you an idea of what the piece sounds like. But I'm a non-conventional writer. I write linear. I suggest for young people to, try to get a live performing group to perform their pieces, because that's the true test right there, And that's been pretty much the basic for me.
I mean, a lot of it is learning by doing. I think there's, like you said, there's like the book stuff you can learn from theory standpoint and all that. But until you actually see it in action, there's theory and then there's the practice. So, I mean, this looks like it should sound good, but until you actually hear it by a performer, we've all written things that look good, and then you listen to it, you're like, that doesn't sound very good. You kind of have to live through that. It's a learning by experience thing. So that's great.
And another thing I would recommend is anyone who goes into writing to make sure that they have somewhat maybe simple and maybe not so simple knowledge of the instruments that they're writing for, because that's necessary. You don't want to be writing and then putting notes out there like for a bass to be going below a low E, unless they do something to their strings, which it happens in professionals. I've seen them kind of tune it differently so they can get down to a B flat if they want to, and those kind of things. So I suggest that they learn actually the tessitura of the instruments, that they have some kind of guidance and know a little bit about fingerings, so it doesn't become awkward sometimes. So that's very important. And I think those that study music and writing, they go through instrumental classes, which they get an opportunity to play the instrument actually and all that. I hated that because especially the woodwind instruments, I'm a brass player. So when you put that bottom lip over the teeth and to accommodate for the reed and stuff, at the end of the day, I would go and play and it would mess up my embouchure.
Oh yeah, those were tough classes. Yeah, I hear you. As a fellow trumpet player, it was double reed classes were tough.
Start cracking notes, and then all of a sudden the band director looking at you, hey, Victor, what's going on?
Sorry, I had clarinet class. Yeah. That's great. All very good advice, balancing the practical and the inspirational and all of that. So a lot of people are inspired by this next question. I'm often inspired by it, which is food. If we were going to have dinner tonight, Victor, number 5, what is your favorite food?
Well, it's an expensive one. And I only visit the restaurant like maybe twice a year. I've been there 3 times 1 year, but usually an average of 2 times a year. And that's to go eat stone crabs at Joe Stone's here at Miami Beach.
I'm going to have to put that on a list.
It's one of the best restaurants in the world, actually, for stone crabs. They have their own fishery. They have their own people. They don't have any third party messing with their food. It's all it's fine restaurant, but it's very expensive. And I love the colossals, the stone crabs. They serve you like a couple of them, 2 maybe 3, and you've had a massive dinner because they're thick and they're just great. And you can have them
If I
with
find my way down there, you'll have to take me there.
oh yeah. I think I took George and Bob Dingley once there, and yeah, now it's your turn.
I love it. All
It's
right,
fun.
Victor. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and for joining everybody. And really had a great time getting to talk to you and get some backstory and some really great inspirational thoughts from you. So thanks for joining us today on 5 Questions with Victor López.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You got it. Have a great rest of your day, Victor. Bye, everybody.